Wonderful. Thank you.
Sure.
Let's shift gears a little bit and want to hear you describe your own personal career path. So this is, I don't think any 16-year-old high school junior says, I want to be a client services director for the biotechnology.
No, they don't.
But it sounds like a really fascinating career. So
I absolutely love it. Yeah.
From where you are today.
Well, so the one, and this is a piece of advice that I try and give a lot of the students that I talk to, and you know, and I'm an alumni, as an alumni of my high school and my college, I try and give advice to current students. And usually the similar advice that I give is that the path to your, I want to say ultimate, because that's a very subjective term, ultimate goal or ultimate, you know, career track. It can vary. But in any case, those things aren't linear. And so my career path was one that took me through a number of different avenues. I started out working in a restaurant. I got out of college and there was not a lot of money there available, or not a lot of jobs available for the major that I had. And the major that I had was very generic, so that was part of it too. But I served tables for years, and then was able to actually meander my way into, I spent some time doing production work in terms of producing like, you know, events and shows, you know, weddings and karaoke events and contests and things like that, which I will say, as unrelated as it may sound, the ability to work with multiple different people, to collaborate with a group for one goal, that tracks very much to what I do today. I would have to work with the bar owner. I'd have to work with the equipment guy that ran my equipment. I'd have to work with, you know, the performers or the singers in this case, to manage and essentially run a show on a weekly night or a weeknight. And it was live. So there was a lot of different collaborations that had to go in, and I had to know who the right people were and make sure there was a good fit with everybody for this production move. So that's one thing that kind of, whether I knew it or not at the time, was preparing me for the role that I ended up going into.
Right, on the job project management, right?
Absolutely, it exactly was. And serving tables, I'll tell you, as I was told, because I needed to realize this too, you can, you know, look at serving tables as you want it. And I say, at a time like this, I'm certainly lucky that I was able to move past the industry, but it's a profession that takes such a high level of comfort and under pressure. It's a high volume, high pressurized sales arena in order to serve tables. It just is. That's some of the best preparation you're going to get for life in general. How to be cordial to people, how to work with different group or different people within one group. I mean, you have a 4-year-old kid and a 25-year-old mother who's angry because she's had a long day and the kid's upset. You've got to find a way to make that a positive experience for everybody at that table. So that skill set was one that carried me very far and still does to this day. But from working in events and serving tables, I really just got to a point where I had to make a change into a more corporate setting for the lifestyle that I wanted. And so I ended up working in corporate insurance for about 5 years, as a matter of fact. And what my knowledge base there was how small businesses work. I was working with mom and pop shops that ran ice cream stores, dry cleaners, restaurants, and I was essentially helping them to manage their small business insurances. That then got me, and as I was sort of going through my own personal journey of, you know, what would I like to do, I realized that one of the things that would make me excited would be to help people avoid some of the challenges that I ran into out of college. So I thought, well, maybe I could go into recruiting, or maybe I can go into, you know, being an advisory, having an advisory profession to help kids, help alumni, help, you know, people that had just been where I was, to get into a profession, to find their marketable skill. And so I started to look at the company I was at for insurance to try and pivot into their recruiting division, but they actually outsourced that and it was no longer available. So I took a role at a recruiting firm that did all contingency. It was light manufacturing, so it was a totally different industry. But I finally was able to get that connection to people that I'd been missing, that I'd had as a server, but was missing in the corporate world. And was able to marry those two together and find a way to, this is a marketable skill to help people to build their careers, but also to do it in a corporate setting that will allow me to live and make the money that I needed to make for the life that I wanted. And then it was then there was all that training, all those different things took place. And then there was fate that came into play. And this is another piece of advice that I give is, luck is one of those things that people talk about and throw around a lot. And I think it shortchanges your skill set when you say, oh, I was lucky. There's definitely some luck involved, but luck is usually when, as we've heard from Cassius Clay, that old famous quote, luck is when hard work meets opportunity. And so I call it fate. When you have worked really hard and then all of a sudden an opportunity presents itself at the right time, that's fate. The key for you there is to take the opportunity. I met a gentleman on a cruise ship who worked at BioBridges. And we got to talking about our careers together, and he described what he did. And I just said, this sounds awesome. I would love to do what you do. It took me 4 years to actually make the transition and make the decision because I was living in a small town in Pennsylvania and he was working in Boston. I was very just afraid. I was nervous, but that was the opportunity that I was waiting for. That was the fate, sort of the luck that had to come in. I was ready for this opportunity. The hard work had gone into it. I knew how to work with people. I knew how to recruit people. I knew how to understand what their needs were for their projects. I didn't have the arena in which to do it. And so I was about to get married and I didn't want to keep working the job that I was at their current recruiting firm. And the next thing I knew, I got on the phone with my friend who had kept in touch with me after the 4 years from meeting on the cruise ship and said, let's talk about this job you have. 4.5 years now, I haven't looked back. And it's just been, and this job has been an utter joy because it conglomerates all my different experiences into one day to day.
Wow, that's an amazing story.
It's certainly not common.
No, it isn't. So now, what is a typical day in your life like on the job? I imagine the answer is it really isn't a typical day, but if you can just sort of construct a hypothetical typical day.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And I love that question because it always reminds me of what I need to do daily because it does vary. It does change. My day can fall into 3 buckets really, and it all is for the same goal outcome. My job is to build my network and build my connection and develop business relationships that will foster long-term opportunities for both BioBridges and for myself. My boss is fantastic in that he says, as much as you want to build a BioBridges brand, and I have the shirt on to make sure we have it in there, but as much as you want to build a BioBridges brand, you also want to build the Paul Fabre brand. And his mindset is if people like you and people want to work with you, whether it's you or my colleagues, that brand that goes around with you is going to ultimately fulfill your career and also fulfill BioBridges if you're working with us. And so my job is to do that, is to essentially create and build connections. It falls into 3 buckets. There is new prospecting and client outreach that I do, where I'm calling on new clients to introduce myself. And that's really my approach always is I just want to introduce myself. I'm not here to sell you anything right away or provide you with a resource right away. I don't know if that even is a possibility when I pick up the phone. My goal though is to establish a connection and grow my network from working and talking and communicating and having a relationship with CMOs of companies, heads of clinical operations, heads of medical writing, those types of things. So that's one bucket. The second bucket falls into account management. And that's where the things vary. That's where it could be anything from setting up an interview for a new client who needs to talk to one of my clinical operations people, to reviewing the work that was done by one of my medical writers last week, just to make sure that the way that she approached the work and the way that the client is expecting the work to be approached, we're on the same page. Mm-hmm. And then the third bucket would be so account management, business development, new client prospecting, account management. And then the third would be in training. That's the other piece that I have purposely not forgotten, because my job is one where you have very little oversight. You have very little micromanagement, very little, you don't have metrics to hit or people that you need to send a report to every day about what you did. So you're very autonomous. Mm-hmm. But the goal for that, because of that, you need to be very disciplined and, building yourself, because if there's any issues, you're the one who's decided and made and put the operations that you have in place for your day to day. So you've got to be disciplined in what you're doing to make sure that your outcomes and your results match up with what the expectations are. And so I spent a lot of time training, whether that's talking to other colleagues of mine who are, more tenured, or reading books about, relationships and business management, and really, corporate sales. And corporate sales is a 4-letter word, literally a 4-letter word, but it also is a 4-letter word in general to some people. And when you think about it, the only thing that really ever, the item that sold this Zoom product was probably a sales guy or a saleswoman who got on the phone and said, really great technology that helps you and your colleagues connect when you're not able to be in person. That started with a sales role, but sales really encompasses all of those things that I just described: managing accounts, managing relationships, building your network. And so my day-to-day really centers around outreach. It centers around relationship management and account management, and then training to make sure that I'm at my best for the people that I work with. I'm not an expert in clinical operations, but I am an expert in personnel. And so I need to make sure I'm keeping myself sharp on those areas.
This has been absolutely fascinating. We're just about out of time, unfortunately. But do you have any parting words of advice? So if we've got any high school, college students listening to you today, what if they thought this sounds fascinating? I'd love to do that when I grow up. What kind of advice would you give them?
I would go back to what I said earlier, which is work hard. Be disciplined when you have to. I'm a person. Yes, I have a lot of discipline. I played football for years, and you don't get through that without having some commitment to regimen and discipline. Mm-hmm. At the same time, I'm not a person that lives on a strict regimented schedule. It's just not natural for me, in the sense that I do the same thing at 8 o'clock every day, because that's going to change. Mm-hmm. What I can say is, when you have to be and when you can be, as much as you can be, stay regimented and stay disciplined, and know that hard work you're putting in, it's for a reason. It's going to lead to something, and it may not be as obvious when you're doing the work. When I'm making those difficult cold calls in the morning, or sending an email that takes a lot of my thought, my work at that point isn't necessarily just for the outcome that I'm working on at that moment. It's a longer term education that you're going through by having to do that exercise. And this book that I read right before I started this job here was called Mastery. It's I want to say it's by Gladwell or Robert Greene. I think it's by Robert Greene. I recommend it to anybody. And it describes some of the best people in their industry: Edison, Einstein, Tesla. And the interesting thing about it, all of those folks had different experiences that led into one sort of goal or one outcome, mm-hmm. of their legacy. Mm-hmm. And what I would say is, to anybody who's watching this, know that the work that you're doing, the things that you're putting in every day, whether it's going to the gym and lifting weights to make sure you're faster and stronger for the football team or for the track team, or whether it's sitting down and reading a book, all those different experiences are there to help you get to the ultimate goal that you're striving for, to prepare you for the moment that's going to show up. The thing is, you don't know when it's going to happen. So just keep working. Stay disciplined when you can, but also, have some freelance and open-mindedness about the things you do day to day. Regimen is good, but when opportunities come in that are a little unorthodox, you want to be open to them, because, as you heard, you might meet something on a cruise ship that could change your life. And so be open to those things, but stay diligent in working, because the hard work is going to prepare you to take that risk that you may not be in your mind ready for, but that you've been training for your whole life.
That's a beautiful thought. Thank you so much. This has really been a pleasure talking to you today.
No, you're wonderful for even taking the time. I appreciate you including me in this, and it's an honor to be able to share some of the things that I've learned with people that I hope can benefit from them. I know that when I was in their shoes, little things here and there would help to motivate me, and I hope that I was able to do that.
Thank you.
Sure.
All right.